I loved Geraldine Chaplin. I mean, Julie Christie was beautiful, but I wanted him to stay with Geraldine Chaplin.
I'm there, you said.
Yeah, I said, and if you're busy, I'll take over. So all of that coming out today. But first, this news this Saturday morning. In the Oklahoma City bombing case, authorities are checking for possible links between Stephen Colburn and that bombing. Colburn appeared in an Arizona court on unrelated weapons charges Saturday. He's scheduled to return again on Tuesday. Now, investigators reportedly don't believe Colburn was directly involved in the bombing, but according to published reports, Colburn says he does know Timothy McVeigh, one of two men who is currently under arrest for that bombing. And in the O.J. Simpson murder case, his lawyers may have a difficult week ahead. They'll be attacking the DNA evidence by trying to raise doubt about how it was collected and tested. NBC's John Gibson joins us from Burbank this morning with the latest. John, good morning.
Good morning, Jack. Robin Cotton is back on the stand in the O.J. Simpson case. She has said the DNA evidence points to Simpson with a 170 million to 1 chance that it could be someone else. The defense plans to explain that damaging evidence with a theory that someone framed Simpson. The prosecution's DNA evidence says O.J. Simpson is the killer. But the Simpson defense is arguing that the prosecution's own DNA tests show that a mystery fourth person left DNA inside the Bronco along with the blood of O.J. Simpson and both victims. The defense believes that a cop used the bloody glove to smear evidence inside the Bronco.
The combined testimony suggests very persuasively that one of the detectives was inside that Bronco on the morning of the 13th.
The defense has invested a lot of court time trying to show the jury that Mark Furman had a motive to frame O.J. Simpson, that Dennis Fung and Andrea Mazzola cross-contaminated evidence at the LAPD crime lab, and all of that led to DNA results that unfairly identify Simpson as the killer. At this moment, the defense hasn't actually named Mark Furman as the man they believe committed the frame-up, but they are getting close. Jack?
John, a lot of developments recently in the case. You mentioned Mark Furman. He recently filed suit over these accusations that he's a racist and, in fact, had planted evidence. Does that worry the defense at all?
These lawyers aren't going to back off because of a lawsuit, but it is true. Mark Furman has a $50 million suit against the New Yorker, and last week he named Robert Shapiro as another defendant, so he is willing to use the courts and put the defense lawyers on the defense.
All right, John Gibson from Burbank. Thank you, John.
All right.
In other news today, health workers are using an unusual weapon in their fight against the deadly Ebola virus in Kikwit, Zaire, the center of the outbreak of that virus. They're using megaphones as they attempt to warn the public against spreading of the infection. They also plan to give away pamphlets about the infections. Dozens have died from this painful affliction. Several new cases are being reported this morning. And the sailing community in the United States is sad this morning. That's because New Zealand's Black Magic 1 has won the America's Cup. The crew defeated Dennis Conner and his boat Young America, sparking a huge celebration. Speculation is New Zealand, that celebration could last until the next race, which is in the year 2000. Now, Dennis Connors has won 4 times, but he's the only American skipper to lose. That's the news this Mother's Day morning, and now here's Joe Whitty with the Mother's Day weather.
Today's weather is brought to you by Visa.
We've got a little serious weather to talk about, too. Take a look at the weather radar, and you see we've got some strong thunderstorms moving across the midsection of the country into the Ohio Valley. In fact, we have tornado watches posted this hour until 11 o'clock this morning. Keep a weather eye here all the way from Memphis to Pittsburgh, and keep an eye on your local forecast during the course of the day. Stormy weather for the east. We'll have some stormy weather for California. Midsection of the country, beautiful, bright sunshine, and pretty mild, too, in parts of the southeast. That's a quick look at the national weather. It is now 5 after the hour right here on Today. We're going to find ourselves with Denver going up to 64 degrees, 73 in Chicago, 92 degrees in Miami, nice and warm. Boston going up to 63 degrees. Seattle, 76 wet in San Francisco with a high of 60. And for our viewers watching live on Super Channel in 30 countries, in the 57 degrees, that's 14 degrees Celsius. And that wraps up the weather across the country and Europe. Hey, we've got a little friend here. Zach, how are you? Do you want to say Happy Mother's Day? Yeah, oh, what a smile you got. Giselle, this is enough to die for right here.
I am telling you, he's a Gerber baby to be sure. What a doll. That makes you happy. Thanks so much, Joe. All right, in sports this morning, NBA playoff action today has Phoenix at Houston, San Antonio at Los Angeles, and Orlando at Chicago. In the NHL, Detroit is at Dallas, the Rangers at Quebec, Buffalo and Philadelphia.
Bombs and politics. On the occasion of National Law Enforcement Appreciation Week, today President Clinton joined former President George Bush in bashing the National Rifle Association.
And President Clinton warned the gun lobbyists that it is wrong to compare the raid on Waco 2 years ago with the bombing in Oklahoma City last month. Steve Handelsman reports tonight the occasion was an event honoring the nation's fallen police officers.
In the big crowd of cops near the Capitol today, Los Angeles County Safety Police Officer Mike Mosca, whose fellow officer Tom Worley was killed in a robbery last December. That's Worley's son in Mosca's arms. 155 police were killed in the line of duty last year. To honor them and all sworn officers today, President Clinton attacked their critics.
No one has the right to run them down or to suggest that somehow it is all right for them to be put in harm's way. That is not the American way, and anybody who does it ought to be ashamed of themselves.
That's a slam at the National Rifle Association. Clinton is siding with George Bush, who quit the NRA last week. In full-page newspaper ads today, the gun lobby begs Bush to reconsider. An NRA-bashing frenzy today grips the national media, says the letter. But again, the NRA calls federal officers black-suited, masked, massively armed mobs of screaming, swearing agents invading the homes of innocents. That's what made Bush mad in the first place. He turned up the heat to back federal agents yesterday.
And I think we all ought to speak up against the excesses of these crazy people who put them in a bad light and refer to them as Nazis and refer to them as jack-booted thugs.
The NRA is demanding a new investigation of the FBI and ATF at Waco. But in the wake of Oklahoma City, the president warned today we can't wait to settle Waco before giving federal agents more power to fight domestic terror.
This plays into the hands of those who would blame the law enforcement officers who keep the law rather than the criminals who break it.
Meantime, here in Sioux Falls today, police officers received a tribute in the form of a blue ribbon. In recognition of National Law Enforcement Appreciation Week, the local Fraternal Order of Police Auxiliary tied blue ribbons on the antenna of police cars. The ribbons are to serve as a reminder for those who died in the line of duty and those who risk their lives daily.
They're the people who keep our communities safe, and it's really easy to kind of forget about them and forget the job they do, and they put their life on the line every day that they go to work.
The auxiliary asked the public to show support by driving with headlights on tomorrow.
Bud Sonic, the postmaster in Pierre, is suspended from his job during an investigation by federal authorities of possible mail fraud. Sonic's son, Barry, recently agreed to give up his real estate license in Wyoming after admitting he sent in his license renewal application after the deadline of December 30th. The elder Sonic is not commenting about whether the late license application by his son has anything to do with the investigation of his duties as Pierre postmaster. And searchers near Harney Peak today finally got a break in the hunt for a missing boy. They found footprints this morning near a cabin that had been broken into. Custer County Sheriff Jim Daggett says dogs are now on the scene, along with about 100 volunteers from as far away as Howard, looking for 12-year-old Leroy DeGrand. The boy disappeared Friday while on an outing with his school. The boy wore jeans, a T-shirt, and possibly a sweatshirt.
10 cars of a freight train left the tracks last night in Hinton, Iowa. The train carried butadiene and flammable liquids. The fire department evacuated 10 homes near the derailment and rerouted traffic along Highway US 75 during the cleanup effort. The 150 people moved out were allowed back into their homes by late this afternoon. Maureen Kennedy, the Clinton administration's director of rural housing assistance, said today that unless the U.S. Senate holds its ground, South Dakota stands to lose $4 million in projects scheduled to begin this year. During a news conference in Sioux Falls today, Kennedy said proposed multi-housing units in Vermilion, Flandreau, Hot Springs, and Custer will be canceled if the Senate decides to go along with the proposed House plan. The apartments have been approved for this year until the House rejected the administration's 10% hike in rural housing assistance, choosing to eliminate the low-interest loans program altogether.
Used by communities across the country. That rescission package hit rural America very, very hard, and that's something that I have a real problem stomaching personally, particularly because on the House side, a lot of those cuts are going to be translated directly into tax breaks for higher income families.
Kennedy says the former FMHA office currently has $250 million worth of loans outstanding in South Dakota. The Republican House plan to cut back would leave single-family home lending intact.
In a moment, a request for a presidential disaster declaration.
And some advice on managing the crop this year, next on News 5.
Amigos, at Chi-Chi's.
And today, and Judge Lance Ito was back on the warpath.
This came during the defense's attempt to discredit DNA testing as proving O.J. Simpson killed his former wife and a friend of hers. John Gibson has the story.
Sidney Simpson at her dance recital the day of the murders. Later, in the early morning hours of June 13th, she called her mother from the police station wanting to know why she and her brother were taken away and what was going on. "Mommy," she pleaded into the phone, "please call me back. I want to know what happened last night." She repeated 3 times, "Mommy, please answer." And finally she said, "Bye." In court, Sidney's father is listening as his lawyers try to blunt the DNA proof that he is the killer of Nicole Simpson. Judge Ito lost his temper, frightening the DNA witness, Dr. Robin Cotton.
You're right. You're right. Okay, I guess we have all possible.
Wait! First of all, you can't talk at the same time. Secondly, when I say wait, everybody stops, including you, Dr. Cotton.
Even with a testy judge, Peter Neufeld is managing to make his point with Dr. Cotton that Cellmark Laboratory has in the past made just the kind of error that Simpson's lawyers say occurred here.
And you got another false positive in this next batch, didn't you?
Yes, we did.
Now, this again was caused by DNA from one sample cross-contaminating a second sample, was it not?
That's right.
The Simpson defense has now put before the jury the simple theory that O.J. Simpson is identified as the killer because in the laboratory his own blood sample contaminated the blood evidence from the crime scene.
This is Historic Preservation Week, and the Sioux Falls Board of Preservation decided to mark that occasion by marking the first bridge to span the Big Sioux River in Sioux Falls. The board today unveiled a bronze historic marker on the 8th Street Bridge. The reinforced concrete and earthen cord bridge was an important engineering feat when built 120 years ago.
You are standing on the site of where it was constructed in 1876. And the Board of Preservation has been adding plaques throughout the city, as has the Minnehaha County Historical Society, just to heighten the interest of the historical background of Sioux Falls.
Due to quality restoration over the years, the Board of Preservation believes the 8th Street Bridge will be around for many more years to come.
The teepee is a symbol of the Native American culture that has been around for 10,000 years or so. And there is a new teepee in Sioux Falls, built to show those unfamiliar with the meaning of the simple structure, a way of life that is as spiritual as it is practical. Cammie Melton has the story.
It's the song sung by Native Americans before erecting every teepee, asking their loved ones to come back and fight the inner battle, to do good for themselves, their people, and others. It's a way of connecting their inner self and God before taking on the task of creating the universe. That's what a teepee symbolizes. The first pole is for the Creator, the next 2 in the bracing tripod stand for the physical and the spiritual.
I always like to start off with God because I always think He's the first thing I should always start off with. When I do that, I know things will be all right.
The next 28-foot pine poles with different colored flags are added, symbolizing the 4 basic races, God and Earth, followed with water, fire, land, and air, all of which must be stable so the teepee and the life it represents is balanced and anchored.
I really believe that, this is my heart. This is my chante that Lakota people say, and my heart's beautiful, and if I don't share it, it's going to be destroyed. It's going to wilter and fade away, and I don't want that to happen.
And Chris stops only to pray for the strength to finish his home. Then a skin of material is wrapped around the teepee skeleton, bringing it all together and making it a safe place to live.
Now I have myself a small, little, beautiful home. May look kind of rough, but I like it.
After laboring for almost an hour, this spiritual and physical challenge has come to an end. Now he may bring things inside his heart, that will help him continue to do what's good for himself, his people, and others.
Everything that I have here is the things inside of me, things that are special to me. And once I give it up, I'll take those things in there proudly and dignifiedly with honor and respect, and I'll put them in there, and I'll sit there and I'll say, this is my home. This is where my heart is.
In Sioux Falls, Cammie Melton, News 5.
Governor Janklow today asked President Clinton to declare a major disaster for South Dakota because of the spring flooding. The governor says that damages to public facilities so far will be more than $9.3 million, and the governor notes the flooding damage affects almost 2/3 of the state, and that this year's devastation is as much as for the entire damage to infrastructure in the flood of 1993.
Well, the sun did come out again today for the second day in a row, and the wind picked up, which tends to dry the farm fields out a little faster. But already farmers are way behind in getting their crops into the ground. As John Austin reports tonight, that means intelligent management this year will be even more important than usual.
If this week's forecast can be carried forth for the next several, South Dakota farmers should still have plenty of time to get soybeans and corn in the field. Many will be switching to shorter-term seed than they have in normal years, but extension specialists warn that in their rush to get a crop planted, farmers shouldn't overlook factors like weed control, possible carryover problems in fields previously slated for small grain, and other available marketing options.
There are some creditors that are now being a little more cautious and extending credit for any kind of spring work.
At a news conference in Sioux Falls today, extension specialists from South Dakota State University said mistakes in any aspect of a farm's operation could be devastating. Burton Pfluger warned producers about operating under the pressure of an ugly 1995 start.
Back into the field, they will be there for long hours, and we need to be concerned with some of the safety issues as well as then some of the relationships back with the family.
We have a good news, bad news scenario when we deal with these things.
Marketing specialist Dick Shane said in spite of inevitably smaller overall crops, farmers could cash in by playing the options and futures market early on, cashing in on a prematurely pessimistic overall forecast.
When we have this overreaction, the prices tend to go a little bit higher than what they'll probably be able to maintain when the planting actually does occur later on and when other crops are planted. And so one needs to take advantage of that overreaction by using appropriate marketing alternatives.
The experts also warned against producers getting what crop they can in the ground and giving up, satisfied with whatever the result.
In years like this, the soil fertility, the weed control, those kind of things will probably have a greater impact on finally whatever that production level is than it might be in a normal year. Actually, you could shortcut things in a normal situation that cannot be shortcut under these conditions.
In Sioux Falls, John Austin, News 5.
But no matter what you were doing today, the chances are there was one main thing on your mind, the sunshine. And for many of us, that made it tougher to get into the cars and head to work. But as Scott Bowden reports tonight, today's sunshine made it possible for some college students preparing for final exams to get outdoors and relieve some of that stress.
As the sun came out for the second day in a row today, some students at Augustana College decided to take a break from their studies and head outdoors to take advantage of the nice weather.
Well, my initial reaction was, this is going to be a great day. You know, whenever we have a chance for the sun to come out, we come out here, play volleyball. Yep. Show up. You know, both of us are originally from California, so, you know, this is pretty much a daily thing for us out there. And when it happens out here, we're on it.
Oh, I love the sun. I try to get as much as I can.
Why is that?
I like the tan. Summertime. Nothing better to do.
Others decided to do both.
I heard it was going to be 75 degrees, and I was like, I don't think it's going to happen, but it turns out it did, so yeah, you're right. You might as well get two things in at once, get some sun, too, so.
But for those students who did leave their textbooks behind, they say they haven't forgotten about their finals. It's just today's one day they could never miss.
I'm not too worried about my finals.
Why not?
They're all three comprehensive, and they're nursing, and I guess they're all multiple choice, so I'll just guess good.
Tomorrow's reading day, so we got all day tomorrow to study, so I just thought, come out today and play. how can you pass up a day like this, you know? You gotta jump on these days, and you can.
In Sioux Falls, Scott Bowden, News 5.
Well, with any kind of luck, it's not going to be that rare in the future, huh?
Well, that's true. Looks like we have one more day of that similar weather like today, tomorrow, Ben. And then after that, it does go down a little bit. We'll tell you about that and plus show you Cook's weather pick after this.
And the always charming supermodel Kathy Ireland. Plus comedian Bill Maher and Fabio's love surprise. Followed by an all-new Late Night with Conan, NBC tonight.
62, again, this is a black and white photo, and that is the Fenn's ice cream truck. This truck was picked up by a tornado 12 miles north of Mitchell, tossed around 5 times, and yes, Rex was driving this truck, and he was in it at the time, and he survived it, a couple of bruises and about 17 stitches, but there's some of the damage that tornadoes can do to actually steal vehicles. Current conditions in Sioux Falls, we are looking at skies that are clear, 69 degrees, dew point now at 53 degrees. We will only fall to an overnight low of 57, southeast winds at 15, and our pressure, it is steady, but it is low, 29.67. Anytime you lower the pressure, of course, you know there's some kind of weather system affecting our forecast. Sioux Falls, 79, and it's been 8 months since we've seen 79 in Sioux Falls. That was on September 20th of last fall. 73 in Minneapolis today, 74 in Fargo, and 79 also for a daytime high in Bismarck with plenty of sunshine to go around. Last night we saw 41 in Sioux Falls, and tonight much warmer, only a low near 57 degrees with mild southerly breezes continuing to blow, kind of helping to mix the air up, and that will help to keep low temperatures on the mild side. But we are watching some scattered storms now developing across northeast South Dakota. Right around Millbank, there's an isolated storm just developing. That will move northeast around 15 to 25 miles per hour, but we'll have to keep our eyes on these storms just moving into south central South Dakota. They may develop a band of showers and storms just in a line across the state, and that may cross us later on tonight into tomorrow morning, but really the chances of precip are only around 30%. Looking at the cloud cover across the area, it looks pretty good. The sky started out plenty of sunshine, just a few high clouds. Then they broke up across Nebraska, just a few filtering clouds. And this evening has been mostly clear, but we are watching clouds.
The company began placing more than 200 sticks of dynamite in certain vital places in the structure so the building will collapse on itself with the timed blasts. After the demolition next Tuesday, rescue workers will then be able to dig through rubble finally and locate the bodies of 2 women still missing after that blast last month that killed 167.
In the O.J. Simpson double murder trial today, the defense began cross-examination of a second expert in the science of DNA. As John Gibson reports, this particular expert brought to court the most damaging evidence against O.J. Simpson so far, that he killed his ex-wife and a friend of hers last summer.
That's what.
You can't argue with science, but O.J. Simpson's lawyers are giving it $1 million shot.
Are you aware of making a mistake in any of your forensic DNA typing cases to this point?
No, I'm not aware that I've made a mistake in any of my cases.
Right. Simpson DNA expert Barry Scheck is trying to show that cross-contamination in the laboratory accounts for the results so damaging to O.J. Simpson. For instance, when lab criminalist Gary Sims handled evidence, did he change gloves?
I don't believe I change my gloves after every item. What I do sometimes would be usually to wash my gloves.
But in earlier testimony, prosecutor Rock Harmon tried to head off this argument by asking questions that ridicule the cross-contamination theory.
Does the DNA of an athletic person that's in a stain have any athletic prowess more than a dead person?
I'm curious to disregard the tenor of that question.
This is the fulcrum point of the prosecution case, and both sides are getting testy with each other, leading the judge to sharp words.
Wait. I'm discussing this with counsel. I'm trying to give him some guidance. Why don't you sit down?
It wasn't just the lawyers getting a scolding. Judge Ito today tossed 2 reporters from the courtroom, not a simple one-day suspension, but a permanent ban.
Those 2 reporters were from Court TV and USA Today. They were kicked out after a juror wrote the judge a note that said their talking was distracting.
In a moment, a 100-year-old building in Sioux Falls gets a fresh start for another century of service.
And before you get out on the lake, there are some tougher rules for safety enforced this year. The story is coming up on News 5.
With a caution flag, the Memorial Day 300 continues at...
Located 100 years ago today, the Sioux Quartzsite structure has seen 2 additions in its century of use, including an extra floor. Today, to mark the turning point, the building showed itself off and showed some new citizens the red carpet into America. Cammie Melton reports.
Recommends that they be admitted to citizenship upon taking the oath of allegiance as required by the law.
More than 50 people from 27 different countries became U.S. citizens today here at the Sioux Falls Federal Courthouse.
This means a lot because my children are American, my husband is American, so I am joining them in the same nationality.
I'm now a citizen. I've been here for so long, and yeah, I just couldn't wait until I was 18 to do this.
But the rights, advantages, and obligations that go along with being an American had to be earned. Everyone had to pass a U.S. history test. As the naturalization ceremony came to an end, the courthouse centennial celebration began at the other end of the building with tours of the historic site. Mary Jean Elliott Skinner came back to learn more about her grandfather's role in the courthouse's history.
I remember as a child, I was 11 when he died, and I remember coming prior to that, to visit the courthouse and see the courtroom. And I believe, I have a memory at least, that his picture had already been hung at that time in the courtroom. And it's still there.
It was also a day for Tammy Wilke's daughter, Katie, to learn a bit more about the history of this building and the history created in it every day.
I used to clerk in this building a couple of years ago for Judge Jones, and so I knew about all of the activities, and I wanted to bring my daughter to see the naturalization ceremony.
Making it a day of history for both the new and the lifelong citizens of this country. In Sioux Falls, Cammie Melton, News 5.
With the return of sunshine to South Dakota, many boaters are itching for a return to the water. But this year, there are some new requirements added to boating for safety. Before, boats under 16 feet in length did not have to have life jackets for every passenger. This year, they do. And as John Austin reports, violators could face a $50 fine for every life jacket they do not have, or worse.
South Dakota boaters spent a fatality-free summer in 1994, but a look at the record offers a strong endorsement to this year's Coast Guard requirement that all boats be equipped with an approved personal flotation device for every passenger on board. Smaller boats with life jackets not aboard or not on were blamed for even more tragedy here than the national average, where 85% of all boating fatalities were not wearing an approved flotation device.
We know from our fatality statistics that of the 800 people who die in boating accidents, some 600 are dying of wet lung drowning. In many cases, nearly all, they are not wearing life jackets. Our goal is to get people to wear those PFDs and prevent those preventable fatalities.
During the summers of 1991, 92, and 93, all 9 of South Dakota's boating fatalities were not wearing a life jacket, and 8 of them in crafts where the PFD was not required, in boats of 10, 13, and 14 feet in length. The National Boating Safety Council will kick off its annual push next week with the common sense message that life jackets don't work if they're not worn.
Today's life jackets come in so many different colors and shapes and sizes that they're much more comfortable than they ever have been in the past. Slipping one on yourself, and especially on your child, should be as automatic as putting on a seatbelt in a car.
And just like the frequency of accidents in shorter neighborhood trips far exceeding longer drives where the seatbelt is more commonly remembered, most boating fatalities occur on nice days in calm water with very little common sense. John Austin, News 5.
Well, Memorial Day is coming up, and with it, the traditional vacation travel season across America. After a long, cold winter and a long, wet spring, many people are ready for a getaway. But as Beth Fuller reports tonight, if you don't have your plans made already, you may be out of luck.
The American Automobile Association predicts more than 26 million motorists will hit the road Memorial Day weekend. And like past years, it will cost travelers more to get to their destination. Because as summertime demand for gas increases, so does the price. According to AAA of South Dakota, statewide a gallon of gas costs about $1.21 a gallon. That's slightly more than the national average of $1.20. Local retailers say factors other than Memorial Day force prices up.
I know Memorial Weekend for us is a huge weekend, so but we don't jump the prices unless we have no choice.
If your plans include a visit to one of the state parks, you better call now and make reservations. Many of them are already filled up, and here at the Palisades, they only have 4 spots left for Memorial Day weekend. But if your first choice campground is already booked, then the State Parks Department may be able to help you come up with a plan B.
If you call for Lewis and Clark and they don't have any sites left, the people at the reservation center can check another park and find you a place to camp, hopefully.
If weather cooperates, more than 100,000 people could fill state parks and campgrounds, making it the busiest Memorial Day weekend ever. At Palisades State Park, Beth Fuller, News 5.
About 20 people were hurt, 2 of them seriously today, when a tornado slashed through a busy mall near Nashville, Tennessee. As Cynthia Williams reports, the twister left a wide path of destruction in a very congested area.
Sheets of rain were blowing through, and the van rocked back and forth, and the windows just exploded. Nashville's Rivergate Mall looked like a war zone. Store windows were disintegrated, roofs were blown off buildings, trees were toppled, and power lines blew down. The tornado hit around lunchtime, a time when the mall was packed with employees as well as customers.
And then I just told them to get back in because we got a tornado out here.
Most people were inside stores in the tornado's path and terrified.
And I heard someone say, get to the back of the store, and I ran.
Did you copy what 46 said there?
Officials are amazed that more people weren't seriously injured or killed. They're totaling up the damage and counting their blessings.
Also in Tennessee, a tornado killed 3 people and injured at least 20 others in the town of Etheridge. And I have a feeling you're going to say those were not the only 2 tornadoes today.
Well, yeah, there's at least now coming in reports of at least 40 tornadoes alone in Tennessee. We'll tell you why all that severe weather is occurring. Plus spell out our weather after this.
Crime Lab relied on 2 tests to say that Scott Davey could be the killer: the ABO typing test and polymorphic enzyme screening. The state maintains that was more than enough to convict.
I think that Mr. Davey was convicted because of the overwhelming evidence of his guilt. That evidence came from people that knew him and his wife, saw how he was, how this course of domestic violence escalated, became worse, became more threatening, became more violent.
But now an independent laboratory has retested the semen samples from the crime. Though the tests are not yet public, reportedly they may rule out Scott Davey completely as the source of the semen using the much more restrictive DNA identification method.
They are not too sure he can even be a donor of it.
The purpose of the pretrial discovery is, again, before you make a conclusion, is to look very carefully at the results that had been completed, or the results that came out and the testing procedures that were used previously.
Scott Davey was back in court today, his attorney asking for copies of the original notes and photos from the state crime lab tests.
I'm hoping to show that I didn't commit this.
Prosecutor Dave Nelson does not want to hand over the notes and photos.
Well, all of the information that has been sought by this petition has previously been turned over to one of the defendant's previous lawyers. He had an opportunity to examine it, had an opportunity to visit with our expert, Mr. Reese, on a couple of occasions, both over the telephone and in person, had an opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Reese at trial, and had every opportunity to get all of the evidence before the jury that they needed to decide this defendant's guilt.
Today's hearing was inconclusive. A foul-up at the Minnehaha County Courthouse meant that the court could not locate a necessary notice of petition as ever having been filed.
Well, later in the afternoon, the court clerks found the mislaid petition. Presumably, presiding Circuit Court Judge Jean Paul Keene will now get a date, set a date to hear the petition for those state crime lab notes and photos.
In other news tonight, it's been more than 100 years since the Indian and cavalry battle that came to be known as Custer's Last Stand. And still, historians argue over what really happened there. But as John Miller reports tonight, the National Park Service is back at the Custer battle site at the Little Bighorn, armed with technology to try and find out.
More than 200 cavalrymen died at Custer's Last Stand. Their identities and the answer to how it all happened are buried here beneath the battlefield at Little Bighorn. But historians and scientists are most puzzled by what happened here. at a section of battlefield called Deep Ravine.
Immediately after the fight, 3 days afterwards, burial parties discovered the bodies of about 28 7th Cavalrymen in the bottom of this ravine. But they haven't been seen since that day.
They'd like to unearth some answers without digging up an historical landmark.
And that's what we're trying to do here is scan an area that may contain the remains.
It looks sort of like a wheelbarrow, but this surveying device can do a whole lot more than move dirt. It can look 6 feet beneath it. Designed to locate buried waste material, scientists hope it can also find buttons or bullets or pocket knives and help them learn more about the U.S. cavalry soldiers.
We're finding many of them have back problems at 22 years of age. They have bad teeth, broken bones that have healed, stomped feet from being around horses.
Now they're hoping these machines will provide more images, solving the mystery of what happened to those last 28 soldiers at Custer's last stand, digging deep into a hazy piece of American history without leaving a scratch.
By the way, even if human remains are found, they likely will not be dug up.
A weekend getaway to Lake Francis Case is not such a good idea this week. The Game, Fish, and Parks Department says the lake is at its highest level ever, about 12 feet above normal summer elevation. That means some state and federal parks and many boat ramps along the reservoir are closed. The water is being held back in the reservoir to keep from making flooding along the Missouri River downstream worse than it already is.
Who says that nothing is free anymore? South Dakota State Parks are hosting a free open house for the weekend, not only to let people know what they have, but to show off some new features. As Ted Copy reports, this is a marketing strategy for the future.
It's one of the first truly nice weekends to get outside in South Dakota, and for state park lovers, it couldn't come at a better time. For the next 2 days, the state has dropped the $2 per person entry fee in the name of advertising. Open House Weekend includes free admission to state parks and free fishing. It's the state's way of welcoming visitors back and hopefully attracting some new ones.
What we really hope happens is they decide to come back again and start becoming a park user.
And for those park users, this year, the state has implemented a new centralized reservation system. Campers wishing to reserve a spot simply call an 800 number now rather than the individual park. The state parks then get the reservations over this computer. In the past, reservations cost $6. Now, they're free, but you have to pay for the camping spot when you make the reservation. Park officials say that's to cut down on the number of no-shows and one other reason.
Our parks have become so busy over the last few years. Our visitations have grown and grown. And some of the parks, their office staff just could not handle all the calls coming in.
Bottom line, Stick says, they want to better serve people who come here to get away. At Palisades State Park, Ted Copy, News 5.
And South Dakota State Parks are celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. Well, if you don't want to ride in the boat this summer, maybe you'll want to ride behind the boat on water skis. Well, Beth Fuller never did that until today, and as she reports from Catfish Bay north of Sioux Falls, she had some professional coaching when she took the plunge.
You see the pros and maybe even your friends flying across the water, and it looks so effortless and like so much fun. So for those who've always dreamed of riding the waves, Catfish Bay Water Ski Park offers lessons, even for beginners. I've never touched a water ski before, so Jim Bruns and Bob Euchre from the Sioux Falls Water Ski Club started my lesson on land, so I could get a feel for the tug of the rope.
The boat will pull you, and you basically, it'll kind of stand you right up. What you want to do is try and pull that handle into your hips, and don't let it pull you forward. You want to keep your knees bent.
That's not supposed to happen. Keeping legs slightly bent and arms straight are key, but most important is working with the boat.
That's a bit easy. No problem.
Yeah, right.
All right, let's go.
The first thing I learned today is every skier has his or her own tips, and reminders from coworkers were causing anxiety as we headed for the water.
All right, these boots aren't tight, right? Because Ted told me that if my boots are tight, my legs are going to get shredded.
My first time out was a little overwhelming. Actually, so were the following 5 attempts. On my 6th try, I caught a glimpse of success.
Sometimes victory is sweet, but short.
The next time, everything clicked, and I skied around a lake twice. which is the whole idea.
Doesn't matter if you're a junior or an adult. It's, lessons available for everybody. There are private lessons. There are group lessons.
So you too can experience the thrill, the anxiety, and the agony that comes with water skiing. Near Sioux Falls, Beth Fuller, News 5.
If you are interested in learning how to ski, Catfish Bay will be offering.
And he, of course, told his wife to run get the camera, and she did not volunteer to do that. Instead, he had to go get it and got this great shot. We thank him for sending that in, and we remind you, of course, please, if you are caught outside with a tornado, head to the ditch or find a culvert for safety. Currently in Sioux Falls, no severe weather in our forecast, just very nice weather conditions. Clear and 59 right now, dew point at 53, and west winds are now blowing at 10 miles per hour. And our pressure continues to rise now. Cold front has moved through, and it is at 29.93. And we are finding temps generally still in the upper 50s to lower 60s. 61 right now in Brookings and Worthington, also Minneapolis. 54 in Aberdeen, and the winds are gusting northwest at 24, as high as 30 miles per hour. And some of those breezes may come down to Sioux Falls. Earlier I thought we'd see some light winds, but there's some
would have expected.
Well, the state earned a B in economic performance, a C in business vitality, and a D in developmental capacity. According to the Corporation for Enterprise Development, development capacity grades the state's capacity for future growth and recovery from economic problems. Colorado, by the way, was the only state to receive all A's.
Governor Bill Janklow today declared 6 more South Dakota counties as state disaster areas. This brings to 44 the number of counties the governor is asking President Clinton to declare as federal disaster areas because of spring flooding. The 6 new counties today include Bonham, Douglas, Grant, Hutchinson, Lincoln, and Walworth. A federal disaster declaration would make the counties hit with high water eligible for federal disaster relief programs.
Well, Sioux Falls is booming at any rate, and it seems the only thing keeping it from growing even more is the availability of people to work in industry. But that means those people have to have a place to live. And affordable housing is tough to find locally. So today, a group of Sioux Falls business leaders unveiled a long-awaited solution in a partnership. Ted Coppy reports.
The apartment complex you see doesn't look all that unusual, but it is. Not in its design, but in how it was paid for. The River Run Apartments are one of a number of affordable housing complexes in Sioux Falls, made possible thanks to this group, the Sioux Empire Housing Partnership, a group of businesses, financial lenders, government agencies like the South Dakota Housing Development Authority, and developers with one goal: to reduce the mortgage amount on housing facilities and pass those savings on to tenants with qualifying low incomes. So far, the group has pooled $6.3 million to help build apartments like this one. What it boils down to is more multiple family housing for Sioux Falls, which task force leaders admit addresses only immediate affordable housing needs here. Sioux Falls Planning Director Steve Metley refers to the Planning Department's housing forecast for the year 2015.
These young people that are moving into town are going to move up in the income brackets in town, are going to demand more single-family housing. So what we're saying is, as we move along with these kinds of organizations, we'll want to move more toward trying to find ways to assist with single-family housing.
Housing Task Force Chair Doug Hayek says today's announcement is just the first step.
It has never been our objective to concentrate on multifamily housing, because I think all of us on the task force, and I know the mayor agrees, that for people who want to have single-family homes, that's the best. That makes the best community.
That, says Hayek, is the next step. But until then, the housing partnership will focus on what they call better affordable housing, meaning more apartments with outside entrances, on-site playgrounds for children, and more maintenance. Something possible, partnership members say, because of one thing: cooperation. In Sioux Falls, Ted Coppy, News 5.
Long distance and emergency telephone service throughout much of eastern and central South Dakota was interrupted today after a fiber optic cable was cut west of Salem. The cut cable shut off major phone routing links between Sioux Falls, Mitchell, Pierre, Aberdeen, and Watertown. A backup system from U.S. West Telephone Company was in place but could not handle the volume of calls. Emergency 911 phone service in McCook and Minnehaha counties had to bear the brunt of the overload. Metro Communications in Sioux Falls found itself virtually cut off from many places. The phone mess was a potentially expensive problem for many businesses, and there was a danger of life-threatening situations for emergency calls. 911 dispatchers made do with an alternative 7-digit number this afternoon.
I forgot it was in there.
I know. We deal with public safety. We deal with lives and property every day. So it was taken very serious. We called U.S. West right away to find out what happened and how long it was going to take. And then we notified the media so that the public would have a backup number to call if they should call 911 and couldn't get through. We'd hate to see someone's father or wife or something having a heart attack and they call 911 and can't get help.
U.S. West reports tonight that it repaired all of the cut fiber optic cables by 7:45 tonight. Several communities, by the way, were without long-distance service all afternoon.
There will be no retrial of the Black Hills Institute of Geological Research on charges of stealing fossils. That includes the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton nicknamed Sue from federal land. Also charges of laundering money, concealing evidence, and falsifying customer documents. The federal prosecutor, Karen Schreier, says a retrial would not be using the best use of the government resources. In March, a federal jury in Rapid City found the defendants guilty of only 8 felonies and 5 misdemeanors. Dozens of other charges deadlocked the jury.
In a moment, another security breach at the White House and gunfire.
A fence jumper shot. Next on News 5.
It's the best night security breach and shooting. The president left for his morning jog through a door he seldom uses, and White House security was tight. It was around 10:45 last night, after Mr. Clinton finished a speech on Capitol Hill, after his motorcade got back to the White House, a half hour after Mr. Clinton walked into the south entrance, that the electronic intrusion alarms went off. Man over the fence. Secret Service agents caught up with 37-year-old Leland William Majeski on the south lawn as he ran toward the mansion. They say one officer fired one shot when he realized Majeski had a gun. The bullet piercing Majeski's arm, then the arm of Secret Service officer Scott Giambattista. All of this taking place just a few steps away from the White House itself. Spokesman Mike McCurry says the First Lady and Chelsea were upstairs, the president at the other end of the building in his office.
The Secret Service did a terrific job last night. He felt in no danger at any time, nor did Mrs. Clinton or Chelsea.
Federal investigators rushed to Majeski's home in suburban Falls Church, Virginia, and took his wife in for questioning. Leland Majeski, seen here in 1976, had reportedly been fired from his job at a pizza restaurant, but had no history of threatening the president.
There is some indication of a mental history. We're just getting into the very beginning of looking at that.
Last September, an unlicensed pilot smashed his plane into the White House. In October, a Colorado man sprayed the mansion with automatic gunfire. And in the wake of the bombing in Oklahoma City last Saturday, Mr. Clinton ordered Pennsylvania Avenue closed to vehicles in front of the White House. But that can't stop what the Secret Service calls fence jumpers.
Well, if Majeski intended violence, he was not very well prepared. The Secret Service found his gun not loaded. Majeski was charged this afternoon with assault and firearms violations. It was like old times in the O.J. Simpson double murder trial today in Los Angeles. The prosecutor, Marcia Clark, and defense attorney Johnny Cochran were on their feet arguing to the judge on a potentially critical point. As John Gibson reports, the point may allow O.J. Simpson to effectively testify in his own defense without being cross-examined.
Came on a response from LAPD criminalist Colin Yamauchi about why he didn't necessarily expect his test to show O.J. Simpson's blood.
I heard on the news that, well, yeah, he's got an airtight alibi. He's in Chicago. And
the defense says that statement, the airtight alibi reference, opens the door to the defense using Simpson's statement to police. On June 13th, Simpson said things to the police that might hurt him, but overall, he offers explanations that the defense wants the jury to hear and is willing to accept any damage other parts of the statement might cause. The prosecution says Simpson's statement has nothing to do with testimony.
That he's talking about his conclusion drawn from the fact that he heard the defendant was in Chicago. How could that possibly relate to the content of the defendant's statement?
Johnny Cochran was next.
We certainly aren't going to yell at Your Honor and become hysterical. We would,
I
just point out
that characterization. Your Honor, that kind of personal attack is very improper and inappropriate. The court knows that it was simply advocacy. I'm not yelling at anyone. And for Mr. Cochran to make that kind of sexist remark, hysterical, I take great umbrage at it. And I think the court should not countenance that kind of behavior.
I don't. She finished? Yeah, Your Honor. I'm not going to yell at Your Honor. I'm going to try to deal with the facts.
Judge Ito said he thought the witness did open the door to the defense bringing Simpson's statement in, and he will decide tomorrow.
The O.J. Simpson trial over the past year has focused new attention on the continuing problem of domestic abuse. And for domestic abuse victims, many find it difficult to leave an abusive home life and start again from scratch. But tonight, Beth Fuller talks with one of those abuse victims who explained why she and others are afraid of losing federal support.
Last year, nearly 800 women and children stayed in rooms like this one at the Children's Inn in Sioux Falls. One of those victims of domestic violence is this woman who did not want to be identified. We'll call her Mary. She and her 5 children stayed here after leaving her husband last Thanksgiving. They suffered 5 years of family violence. Mary says she was shocked at how hard it was to survive on their own.
What do you do? Where do you go? So then you live in your little car in town with your kids going, I'm here. How did I get here? I'm educated. I'm okay. I've got a job. I'm a good mom. And how does society see that?
Shelter directors for victims of domestic violence say Mary's dilemma is all too common, and leaving the situation is just the first of many difficult steps victims face when trying to rebuild their lives.
You have a woman who is in a battering relationship, and she goes to leave. A lot of the times the isolation is so great that she doesn't have the job training because he wouldn't let her go out and work. Or if she went out and worked, he sabotaged it every time she turned around. He doesn't want to see her further her education. She needs to be home.
Shelter directors met in Sioux Falls today in opposition to the Personal Responsibility Act, now before the United States Senate. The act would make it more difficult for victims of domestic abuse that are in poverty to get aid.
They depend on that safety net regarding food stamps and AFDC in order to escape altogether.
Mary agrees. She says without a network of support, surviving on her own would be impossible. But because of that help, she and her children have another chance. In Sioux Falls, Beth Fuller, News 5.
The senior class at Mitchell High School will have a student-led prayer during graduation this Sunday. 88% of the Mitchell seniors voted for that prayer. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled time and again that administration-led prayers at graduation ceremonies are unconstitutional. But the legal status of a totally student-run prayer is not legally clear.
A group of big-time donors received honors today in Sioux Falls, not for giving money, but for giving blood. The Sioux Falls Regional Blood Bank honored those who gave more than a gallon of blood during 1994, and the 3 people who have now reached the 10-gallon mark. Citibank, the City of Del Rapids, South Dakota State University, City Hall in Sioux Falls, and Sioux Steel Company were recognized also for their blood bank support with bloodmobile drives.
Well, soon the name of a former student at the South Dakota School for the Deaf will be part of the National AIDS Memorial Quilt. This afternoon, students at the School for the Deaf, along with former classmates and family of Leif Eliason, gathered at the school for a display of several sections of the acres large AIDS quilt. The quilt is comprised of panels, each with the name of a victim of AIDS. Leif Eliason was an artist, and the current School for the Deaf art students designed and made Leif's panel for the national quilt. The panel will be sewn into a section of the quilt.
What I was afraid of when he had AIDS is that once he died, it would tear our family apart. But I think through this, our family has come closer together. And at first, we weren't able to talk about it, but now we're able to talk about it a lot more. And it's comforting to be able to talk to your family about it.
Leif's panel of the AIDS quilt will be among several on display at high schools across the country. The AIDS quilt sections, including Leif's, will be on display for the public locally tomorrow at the School for the Deaf until 3 p.m.
Across the nation, this is Stroke Awareness Month, a time to consider the risk you may have to this sudden problem that can kill, cripple, or severely debilitate a person. The stroke is not rare. It is the 3rd leading cause of death in the U.S. right now, with about 145,000 killed each year. Cammie Melton's health report tonight focuses on how you can prevent strokes.
This woman is being shown how one of her arteries is becoming clogged, putting her at risk for a stroke. Without enough blood getting through to the brain, tissue will die, and it's possible she could too. How common are strokes?
Very common. It's one of the, it's in the top 3 leading causes of death and disability in the country.
But you can lower your risk of having a stroke by reducing the amount of fat, cholesterol, and salt in your diet. Quit smoking, limit the amount of alcohol you take in, and exercise on a regular basis.
16 minutes, okay?
Okay. Bernadette Smith has had both a heart attack and a stroke. Now she's changing her lifestyle in hopes of regaining her health.
I'm eating the right food, walking when I can, and then coming down here. So
But she says the exercise helps. She, along with many Americans, knows the symptoms of a heart attack, but when she began having slurred speech, she didn't recognize it as a stroke warning sign. Luckily, her daughters did, but there are many other signs you can look for.
Weakness or paralysis. Sometimes a person can have numbness on one side of the body. Sometimes a stroke can cause loss of vision in an eye or trouble seeing to one side or the other.
Those with high blood pressure, cholesterol, and a family history of cardiovascular disease are the most vulnerable. But doctors say the first step to avoiding a stroke is to make a conscious effort to look for those symptoms and know when you're at risk. In Sioux Falls, Cammie Melton, News 5.
I'm betting you didn't have a lot of complaints today about the weather.
Sure didn't. A little bit higher than my expectations, of course, last night, but definitely no problem there. If you have not sent in your weather picture, here's the address, and we are back with tonight's weather pick after this.
Looking for a little action? We've got what you're looking for. Jeep Cherokee with an action-packed 190 horsepower engine, driver's airbag, four-wheel drive, automatic, no-charge air, AM/FM stereo, and more. And if you're looking for an action figure, we've got that too. Now, get a Jeep Cherokee for just over $18,600. Battery included, no assembly required.
See your local Jeep and Eagle dealer for the best in automotive sales, service, and value.
In Aberdeen, it's a budding rock band. In Huron, it's their first batch of cookies. In Yankton, there are 520 people who call it a living. All across the Great Plains, we serve thousands of people in ways that make their lives easier, more rewarding, and more productive. You can call it fun, call it work, call it security, call it breakfast, call it what you will. We call it service. We're here for you. We're Northwestern Public Service Company.
Hi, I'm Tom Cook with Ducks Unlimited. If you're a hunter or just enjoy the outdoors, I want you to be aware of what your Great Plains GMC dealers are doing to help preserve our wildlife environment. Through their generous provision of new GMC trucks to Ducks Unlimited, we've been able to raise over $100,000 to help preserve waterfowl and wetland habitat in South Dakota and western Minnesota. I ask that you keep this in mind when you're in the market for a new truck. Support those that support us, your Great Plains GMC dealers.
Beautiful furniture, all of it on sale, and a gorgeous designer floor lamp, a $99 value, free with any purchase of $199 or more at Inwood Furniture.
Later on The Tonight Show, Jay is partying tonight with Dr. Quinn's Jane Seymour and rock and roll legend Jerry Lee Lewis. Then live from the Cannes Film Festival, Alexandra Wentworth with Dennis Hopper, Marissa Tomei, Will Smith, and Roger Ebert. Plus one of America's silliest kids and Jay in a silly fest. And a Dancing Edo tribute to a Broadway...
Keep it out. Marsha Clark went volcanic when the judge said it appeared to him the door was open for the defense to bring it in.
That was this witness's opinion, Your Honor. What does that have to do with the defendant's statement?
Meanwhile, in testimony today, Simpson's dirty laundry displayed to the jury, his socks with those incriminating splatters of Nicole Simpson's blood. And the prosecution showed the jury pictures of defense experts mishandling those socks, just what the defense has accused the LAPD criminalists of doing.
He's got gloves on, is that correct?
Yes, he does.
Did Dr. Lee ever change gloves during this entire one-hour examination of both of those socks?
I didn't see him change his gloves.
And remember that book that Cato Kalin swore he was not writing? It will be in the bookstores soon. It's different than Cato's testimony under oath. In the book, Cato says O.J. Simpson was extremely angry and upset with Nicole Simpson the day of the murders because Nicole wouldn't let O.J. see daughter Sydney after her dance recital.
So far, the court does not give a reason for dismissing another juror. This leaves only 4 alternates left in the jury pool with possibly months to go in the trial.
Construction has now closed the ramps to and off of Interstate 229 at 10th Street in Sioux Falls. The closing and temporary routing under the 10th Street overpass under construction will likely slow down driving in both directions on 229 even more than before. The South Dakota Department of Transportation asked drivers to observe the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit throughout the area, which will be enforced. Oversized vehicles have to use another route during this phase of the overpass construction. Are we going to eke out one more nice day today?
Boy, I think today we were pushing our luck.
Yeah.
It was about the last straw here. Tomorrow, we got rain on the way, and it could be quite a bit. We'll tell you about that after you take a look at the address for Cook's Weather Pick. Back with tonight's after this.
It's the best offer ever on America's best-selling car. Right now, you can get up to $1,500 cash back, buy or lease on any Ford Taurus in stock. $1,500. Sedans, wagons, SHO, even the sporty new Taurus SE. They're all available with up to $1,500 customer cash, which means you can lease a Taurus, sedan, or wagon for just $268 a month for 24 months.
Penitentiary for sexual contact with a child and had a history of mental problems. Joe Kaminsky, the man under arrest for the shooting outside of the 7-Eleven store in Huron, is a respected member of the community. Now, Kaminsky's lawyer says problems between the men came to a head recently and involved an unspecified incident many years ago. The lawyer says King recently started harassing and terrifying the Kaminsky family. Again, according to Kaminsky's attorney, his client was afraid King was about to do something to Kaminsky's wife and children. Kaminsky will face a preliminary hearing in Huron on Tuesday.
The first three-day weekend of the year means hundreds of thousands of cars on the road. All that extra traffic means an increase in traffic hazards and hazards to public parks. Tonight, Cammie Melton has a few tips on how to keep your holiday weekend tragedy-free.
An estimated 30 million Americans are expected to have to travel to get to their Memorial Day destination this weekend, and 80% of them will go by car, making the roads a busy and sometimes dangerous place to be.
There's more accidents because there's more people out on the road, but those can be avoided if people just use a little more caution than they're used to using.
Hartman says he can't remember a Memorial Day weekend that didn't involve a fatal accident, but he hopes maybe this year people will take their time and be a bit safer.
I'd just like to see people slow down a little bit and show a little courtesy for the other drivers, and also wear their seat belts and avoid the drinking and driving for the weekend, and it should be a good one.
The paths will be as wet as the roads you'll be on to get here. If your destination is one of the state parks, a little common sense can make your weekend in the wilderness as safe as a weekend in your own backyard. Starting first by remembering to avoid the damp rocks while you're hiking. They'll be slippery all weekend long. Even though the paths are wet, they're still the best place to walk.
They do need to be aware, though, that we do have poison ivy and stinging nettles out here. So the best way to avoid those kind of plants is probably just to stay right on the trail, and then they're not going to have any trouble with that.
And keeping an eye on your children is a key part to ensuring a safe family weekend, especially around the campfire.
You need to be aware, if you have small children, to always keep in mind that it's a big attraction for the children. So keep an eye on them, keep them in sight. Always have a bucket of water and have a shovel, and make sure that when you're done with your campfire that you always have it completely put out.
And as you finish packing, keep in mind that although it may not be the most convenient, bringing things that are not disposable will reduce the amount of garbage in the parks and keep the animals there safer as well. Near Garrettson, Cammie Melton, News 5.
And apparently people are taking safety on the roads more seriously in South Dakota. Last year at this time, there were 52 traffic fatalities reported. So far this year, only 31 in South Dakota.
President Clinton today approved a disaster declaration for 38 South Dakota counties hit by flooding earlier this spring. Governor Janklow recently asked the presidents for disaster declarations for 44 counties, but the paperwork for the latest 6 has not been cleared through the White House yet. The presidential declaration will allow those living in the 38 affected counties to apply for a variety of federal assistance programs. South Dakota Senator Tom Daschle says the declaration took longer than usual because of the budget-cutting fever now in Washington, making it tougher to find money to fund the disaster declaration.
Well, chances are, if you're planning to spend the Memorial Day weekend at one of South Dakota's state parks, the recent flooding won't keep you away. Still, several state parks are closed because of high water. Beth Fuller reports on how that might turn into good news if you don't have a reservation.
Lovely weather we're having. Palisades State Park and campgrounds are ready for Memorial Day weekend visitors, and that's the case with most state parks and campgrounds. Although weather is creating less than ideal conditions, flooding is only keeping 4 state campgrounds closed this weekend. They are Fisher Grove near Redfield, Lake Cochran near Clear Lake, American Creek Recreation Area near Chamberlain, and North Point near Pickstown. Palisades Park Manager Mark Steck says they're lucky their campsites are on high ground.
This area of the county is really well drained, and so we don't get much standing water. The drainages, they fill up quickly. They may come up a little bit more quickly, but they also go down.
And there's more good news for procrastinators. If you haven't made reservations by now, you'd normally be out of luck. But thanks to the rain, state park phone lines are flooded with cancellations. If you want to reserve a site or cancel your plans, you can call 1-800-710-2267 or CAMP. The couple of inches of rain in the forecast for today and tomorrow will affect flooding somewhat, but it will probably do more to dampen the spirits of campers as they wait for the sun to come out on Sunday. At Palisades Campground, Beth Fuller, News 5.
In a moment, tonight is for celebration.
But then tomorrow, it's a time for gainful employment for some Southeast Technical Institute graduates. Next on News 5.
It's down to the final day.
Golf equipment is being sold.
Hanover Direct, a Pennsylvania company, is the new owner of Ostad's tonight. A spokesman says the new owner will have certain purchasing advantages to Ostad's.
Almost 400 newly trained technical school graduates are ready for the workforce now. The students today received associate degrees, diplomas, or certificates during Southeast Technical Institute's graduation ceremonies in Sioux Falls. 378 grads honored in agribusiness, health sciences, trade and industry, and business areas. South Dakota Attorney General Mark Barnett gave the commencement address. Traditionally, local industry grabs up these graduates' training at Southeast quickly. After months of battles, Dr. Henry Foster today won committee approval for confirmation as Surgeon General of the United States. The full U.S. Senate must still vote on the nomination of that controversial obstetrician who admits to performing abortions in the past. But the story's not over, as we see in this report from Steve Handelsman.
A few months ago, President Clinton looked like a loser and Dr. Henry Foster like a goner in this Surgeon General fight. So both savored today's win.
This is a good day for the United States, and I look forward to going on to the next stage and to working right through until we get Dr. Foster confirmed.
I want to thank the President, his administration, congressional members, and my family for supporting me so stoutly during these times.
Earlier, as the Senate committee convened, GOP Chair Nancy Kassebaum said she'd vote no.
Despite his many strengths, I believe that Dr. Foster is the wrong person to step into this badly damaged office at this time.
But all 7 Democrats backed Foster.
He has vision, competence, bedrock values, and the right professional credentials to be the Surgeon General.
And despite the fact it took Foster a few days to reveal the number of abortions he'd performed, 39, 2 Republicans backed him, Jeffords of Vermont and Tennessee heart surgeon Bill Frist.
Not based on politics, but rather on the man, his qualifications, and his ability.
But there's political trouble ahead from GOP Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, who wants to postpone Foster's confirmation vote. And Dole's presidential rival, GOP Senator Phil Gramm, said today he wants the Surgeon General's job abolished, and failing that, still plans a filibuster against Foster.
Meantime, in the O.J. Simpson double murder trial today, the latest juror to be bounced from the panel says she is not a racist and denies she was writing a book, which she thinks got her kicked off the case. Also today, the judge dealt the defense a major blow, blocking a defense move to bring O.J. Simpson's statement to police into the trial. David Gregory reports.
The court found good cause to replace juror number 12.
Judge Ito gave no explanation for his latest dismissal. The woman who was kicked off led the jury rebellion last month and was accused by ex-juror Jeanette Harris of kicking black panel members. 8 jurors have now been removed, and the latest addition changes the racial makeup of the panel. There are now 8 blacks, 2 whites, and 2 Hispanics.
That's a different issue.
Judge Ito has also decided to keep O.J. Simpson's police statement out of the trial, meaning O.J. would have to take the stand to tell his side of the story.
It's a ruse by the defense to put in a statement that we cannot cross-examine, to let the defendant avoid ever taking the witness stand so that he cannot be cross-examined.
The defense had argued that a reference to Simpson's alibi needs to be fully explained to the jury.
The only way we correct the situation is by having the statement. And certainly, the prosecution is so worried about this, the admission of this statement doesn't mean Mr. Simpson is not going to testify. It has nothing to do with that.
Were you told by anyone
in testimony, police criminalist Colin Yamauchi is back on the stand being grilled by Barry Scheck about his testing of blood evidence. And the judge is again getting cranky with the crowd.
If I hear another outburst from the audience, I'm clearing the courtroom. There's nothing funny about this.
Ito also took aim at Barry Scheck's questioning, telling him repeatedly to get on with it.
Well, you might not find it on your television tuner, but there is a new station on the air in Sioux Falls. It's KPSC TV, actually a once-in-a-while morning show at Annie Sullivan Elementary School. And as we see in this report from Ted Coppy, the show and the stars of it are a hit.
Every other week at 8 a.m., the hosts, or anchors if you will, of KPSC's morning messages take their seats behind the desk to fill in their peers on what's going on for the day. The anchors, Annie Sullivan Elementary fourth graders. The audience, 565 of their schoolmates. Kayla Alexander, one of the several hosts who share this job, summarizes the show.
We tell what's happening for the school and if kids are taking a field trip or something. And we do the weather.
Not to mention live interviews with special guests like Dr. Jack Keegan, the superintendent of Sioux Falls schools, reports from the field, or from the hallways anyway, and live music. Morning Messages started as a radio show over the school intercom. Then this year, made the transition to closed-circuit TV. It's fairly simple. One camera, one mixer, one switcher, and one director, fourth grade teacher Lori Stevenson, who spends weeks putting morning messages together. Originally, the show ran about 5 minutes. Today, it's 20 from sign-on to sign-off, and interest in this program is still growing. Some might argue the show has a captive audience, but these kids are even starting to attract fans.
Do the kids treat you differently now that you're doing this morning show?
Yeah, sometimes they'll come up to you in the day, weren't you on the show, and things like that.
Everybody knows you when you're on the camera, and then when somebody sees you, they go, hey, I saw you on the morning message this morning.
Rob says someday he'd like to be famous, and at this rate, he probably will. Although from a professional's point of view, Rob and his co-anchors might opt for a more traditional sign-off. In Sioux Falls, Ted Coppy, News 5.
I didn't see anything wrong with that sign-off, Ted. And if you wonder what KPSC means, it's kind peacemakers in a special community.
A statue at the Children's Home Society in Sioux Falls unveiled today pays tribute to the founder of the organization. The CHS showed off its new statue of Elizabeth Sherrod. The statue was a project of daughter of Korshak Julkolsky, the creator of the Crazy Horse Monument, and the grandson of Gutsan Borglum of sculptured Mount Rushmore. The Children's Home Society also dedicated its new Madsen House, a 12-bed residence center for the children in need today. There will be some new faces at the Great Plains Zoo starting tomorrow. A new exhibit is actually an old one, 4 Dall's sheep, a special species native to Alaska, rather. The 4 sheep were born in captivity in Chicago's Brooklyn Field Zoo. They are between 2 and 3 years of age. These sheep replace an exhibit taken down a couple of years ago for pen repairs.
If you plan to spend your Memorial Day weekend or any weekend this summer on the water, there are some new rules in effect you really ought to know about. But as John Austin reports, some wonder whether the new rules are tough enough.
Under current U.S. Coast Guard regulations, every passenger in every boat must be equipped with an available and approved personal flotation device. The requirement was expanded last May 1st to include boats smaller than 16 feet, the ones that need them, the size of craft responsible for 3/4 of fatalities nationwide. But there is nothing in the new federal regs that say life jackets have to be worn. 25 states require that children wear PFDs at all times. South Dakota does not. And Bill Shattuck, South Dakota's Water Safety Program Director, says he hopes the state can pass mandatory PFD legislation for children before a senseless tragedy forces our hand. Shattuck's concern is shared by the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board.
A life jacket does not work unless it's on your child. And obviously, in an emergency situation, the child may or may not have time to locate and put on the life jacket, particularly if the child is thrown from the boat into the water.
Though tempted by warm sun whenever it arrives and calm water, parents tempted to let their kids wander the deck without their life jackets should consider. The last 2 children to die in boating accidents in South Dakota were in canoes during fairly nice weather, not wearing a life jacket. In fact, most fatalities occur when conditions seem ideal for boating. But of the more than 15 fatalities this decade, only 1 involves someone wearing a life jacket. Good reasons for parents to do a little better than the law requires. John Austin, News 5.
Well, Scott Bowden in for Rob Cook tonight. Rob found out what the weather was going to be doing and got out of town, I guess, huh?
Decided to have me do the forecast.
Well, if you're going to do any boating this weekend, you probably don't want to do it on Saturday or Sunday. Moving into Monday, we'll see the nice weather move in, so make your plans then. We'll have all the details next.
Maybe you've always seen yourself in a Jeep Grand Cherokee with a 190 horsepower engine, anti-lock brake.
Mitchell is too small for their 40,000 square foot store, especially when there are 2 other furniture stores in Mitchell and several in Sioux Falls. Barbara says competition is good, but independent stores face the possibility of being left behind as the furniture industry changes.
If we look back 20 years, it's been a wonderful business. But as we look ahead the next 20, our business is changing dramatically. And as I said before, our current structure is just simply not a good investment.
But Barbara says she's sorry to see Johnson's doors close, because for her family, the store wasn't just about the furniture. It's about the people they employed and those they did business with. In Mitchell, Beth Fuller, News 5.
It's been more than 6 weeks since the devastating bombing at the Federal Building in Oklahoma City, but still there is a need for help, and many people around the country, including right here in Sioux Falls, are willing to provide that help. The Empire and Empire East malls in Sioux Falls, along with a network of 70 other malls across the country, have put up drop boxes for donations to go to the Oklahoma City Salvation Army. The money will be used for ongoing care and counseling for the victims. The malls hope to raise $900,000.
Oklahoma City, in many respects, is very much like Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It's a Midwestern city with people just like you or I, and it could have happened here just as easily as in Oklahoma City or anywhere for that matter.
The boxes are outside Victoria's Secret and Joann Fabrics through July 4th.
The judge in the O.J. Simpson double murder trial today released 2 more jurors, and the defense attorneys went to a higher court to try to have part of that decision knocked out. That argument meant today there was no testimony in the explosive trial. John Gibson has the story.
The hotel at this moment, so the court will not proceed with the taking of any further evidence until...
The judge announced he had bounced 2 jurors and the defense was fighting on 1.
After the court made that ruling, Mr. Shapiro, on behalf of Mr. Simpson, requested leave of the court to file a writ with the Court of Appeal.
The juror gone for certain is 28-year-old Farron Chavarria. Her brother and sister talked to the media besieging the family home.
She'll be home in a couple of days, and when she gets back, she'll let you know she'll be ready for statement then.
The juror whose status is up in the air is a 54-year-old black man the defense wants desperately to keep, who is accused of intimidating other jurors. In court, while everyone is waiting for the Court of Appeal, an argument about whether O.J. Simpson can make a dramatic exit when the coroner shows pictures of the gaping and fatal wounds on the victims.
And that's a normal human reaction, and it's certainly consistent with someone being innocent.
The prosecution doesn't mind if Simpson leaves, but opposes a performance exit in front of the jury.
This is not the defendant's opportunity at this time to perform in front of this jury. He can have that opportunity when he takes the witness stand.
Even though both sides seem to agree that Simpson could be absent for the prosecution's show and tell on the butchery of the murders, the judge wasn't so certain. Put off a decision until he could read the law.
And tonight, the California Appeals Court turned
trial.
Mrs. Robertson, would you please draw the numbers of 2 alternates?
The latest from the courtroom.